Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Royal Instinct. Today we're going to be watching a video done by Gary's Economics and the energy crisis that is coming. The problems in Iran are spiraling out of control, and it is going to have a major impact on your wallet. Okay, it's going to have a big impact on prices all around the world. And Gary had a video that will be interesting to break down to see what is going on, how it is going to affect you, and how it is going to impact the wider economy. Okay, why is this important? We are living in times where many people don't have a clue what is going on. Right, the people that who have been elected, the leaders who we put into place, um, you know, these people were elected to rule, make decisions on our behalf, to make the world a better place, and they are letting us down. They are in it for themselves. They are dragging us into wars that nobody has asked for. Okay, yeah. So that when you have a time of crisis like this and many people don't know what the fuck is going on, they are looking for a leader, they're looking for answers, right? And Gary, he comes along and breaks down his video, his take on the global geopolitical implications, the economic implications on the world, on your bottom line. Let's jump straight in and see what Gary has to say.
Sounds good. And you're just waiting for me then? I'm just going to walk in and sit. But I think it would have been a bit absurd for me to not do one explaining everything you need to know about the war. It looks like it's going to be a pretty massive economic crisis. There are some important things that are not being made clear in the news, so we are going to explain.
Yeah, you have to really the things that they tell you in the news, what they are letting you know is just to keep you in a state of anxiety, to keep you in a state where you actually are misinformed, right? They tell you the basics of what is going on. All right, another drone attack here, this place has been attacked, when in essence the big wider scope of the implications of their decisions in that region, the fact that oil prices are about to break out, having a massive impact. Transportation costs are going up. Like, these things aren't really discussed in the mainstream news. Okay, you kind of have to dig around and find, to get a real take what is going on. So that is why he is making his observations on the war.
What's happening, how that's going to affect you economically, how you can protect yourselves from those impacts, and what we can learn about the economy. Okay, so I'm going to run quickly through the basics. They are on the news basically all the time, so you probably already know them, but we do need to cover it very quickly for those who don't know. The US and Israel have basically invaded Iran. Iran didn't fall immediately. They assassinated the leader.
And like, Israel, was, kind of instigate this war, and dragged America into it. Okay, because Israel, America protects the rights of Israel. There are many Israelis who have dual nationality with Israel and the United States, and if you look at it, the conspiracy theorists will say that America is actually run by Israel. I don't believe that, but I do believe certain members within the decision-making parties in America have been compromised, where they kind of have to listen to what Israel's doing and they have to follow its lead. Because, like, Donald Trump was the anti-war president. Okay, he was the one president who never started the war, and right before, at the end of his second term, halfway through it, because I believe the midterms are coming up, he starts this war. Okay, he is somebody who said he will never do one. He is now going back against his word. Why right now? Because this is a war started by Israel, and America is complicit and being dragged into it because Israel has said so.
Iran has blocked this area of sea known as the Strait of Hormuz, through which an enormous amount of the world's oil and gas pass through. At this point, we don't know how long it's going to remain blocked. It could be a few more days, or it could be a few more months, but either way, there is going to be an enormous increase in the price of energy, of oil and gas, and that is going to cause a knock-on impact on the prices of pretty much everything, but most obviously food and fertilizer. So we are starting to see, and we will continue to see, big increases in the prices of energy, oil, gas, and probably food as well. One quite important impact which has not been discussed much on the news is that this has had a big knock-on impact on expectations for interest rates. So this is going to cause inflation to go up. Central banks around the world.
Yeah, and when inflation goes up, the amount of money that you have saved, the money in your hand, in your pocket, in your bank account, the value of it becomes less and less, okay? Because the prices of your everyday goods, of energy costs, of food prices goes up. So when so interest rates will end up going up. Or come down in order to encourage spending during a time when everything is becoming more expensive.
World are supposed to keep inflation low, so there is a question as to whether central banks will increase interest rates. So central banks all over the world were generally in a cutting cycle. Rates were coming down, but at the moment financial markets expect most of those central banks to turn around and start hiking rates. The base rate here in the UK is currently 3.75, and financial markets at the moment are expecting 2 or maybe even 3 hikes this year, bringing the base rate back up to 4.5%, which means your mortgage rates will already have gone up if you're looking for a new mortgage, or may go up.
So again, even if you are somebody who has invested in property, you're going to feel the effects, right? Because, prices are going up, your mortgage is going to go up. It is going to become harder to make your salary stretch, okay, to cover your cost of living, your expensive. There is a cost of living crisis going on already across the world. Many people are suffering, many people are feeling, squeezed by the situation around the globe right now. Okay, this we've been in this kind of state ever since the pandemic, right? For the last 6 years now. It has been a time in the world where inflation is high, right? The cost of energy is high, the cost of food is high, right? And this is just basic goods, goods and necessities of everyday life, just to sustain yourself. And you have to remember, this isn't taking into account luxury goods, right? Things, costs of entertainment, right? Like, I mean, people talk about there is a dating crisis and a fertility crisis around the world. Many young people cannot afford to date. Many young people cannot get on the property ladder in order to start families, right? So when you have the cost of everything becoming more and more expensive, salaries staying stagnant and low, and inflation going up, increasing higher and higher, right? These people cannot afford to live. Young people have the worst deal ever because they cannot even, begin to start their lives, right? All they have, right, is in essence, living with their parents, playing video games, right? Being in these situationships where they don't actually commit to, okay, we're going to get married, we're going to start a family, we're going to, buy a house together and start a life, because it's too expensive. These things keep getting delayed. And, when you have a situation where, these people cannot, afford, they can't even afford to become adults, if you think about it, right? Because, earning money through a job, right? Most of these people, the job market is flooded right now, especially with AI coming, taking away many of these people's jobs. It is going to get more tough. It's going to become harder and harder for these people.
Personally, don't think we will see interest rate hikes to that extent, and I've actually started to bet against those interest rate hikes happening. But at the moment, financial markets are expecting central banks across the world, including here in the UK, in Europe, in Australia, New Zealand, all across the world, to raise the interest rate in response to the increase in inflation, which means your mortgage will go up, and it also means the cost of government borrowing will go up and has already gone up. So in the UK, the cost of government borrowing is very relevant. We've spoken about it a lot. The UK has the highest borrowing costs in Europe. This, when you combine it with the fact that UK growth is low and the total amount of UK government debt is high, means that it has become very difficult for the UK government to spend money at the moment.
So growth in the UK is low, and debt is high. Okay, so they have this debt that they need to manage, but the UK economy isn't growing, right? It is growing at a very slow pace, right? And when you have and the other thing is, right, the government doesn't make it easy. Okay, the government doesn't make it easy for its citizens to contribute towards growth, right? Because of all the bureaucracy, of all the red tape. In essence, what I believe will really solve the issues, especially in the UK, is for them to build more houses. Okay, because but the reason that the government doesn't want to do that is because it will bring down house prices. Okay, and you might think, okay, that's a good thing. If houses are cheaper, more people can buy more property and get on the property ladder. However, people who already own property don't want the value of their assets to come down, right? However, this is placating to asset owners. This is placating to people who already like basically they got wealthy holding on to assets, right? Over for 30, 40, 50 years, right? They've been holding on to property. Great. You know what I mean? Like if that's how you make your money, that's wonderful. But the next generation is going to suffer, right? Because it cannot afford to make a living. It cannot afford to you know, um, get on the property ladder in order to start families and start, contributing to wider society, to contribute towards economic growth, right? And the other thing is, yeah, you have to consider is that when you have this aging population, okay, and they are, um, for example, when that wealth gets transferred to their children, once those people pass away, the government will still get its cut because it will get its inheritance tax, right? It will get its little side deal there. But when you have people, the government making money via an inheritance tax. When the government makes money that way, the price of property still doesn't come down. Okay, so the price of property is designed for the government to prop it up, to keep it growing, so that people who park their pensions in there, people who have parked their life savings basically tied up in the property, that those people are appeased, that those people are happy. However, there isn't and people, the especially the UK government is bringing more people into its country via immigration. Again, where do those people live, right? So you bring more demand for housing, right? And then the price of rent goes up. Okay. So either way, like even if these people who aren't young people who cannot get on the property ladder, right? You think, okay, like at least let me rent a property for a couple of years, and then save up for a mortgage, for a deposit, and then buy a house, right? Because those people, right, because the rent is so expensive, they can never afford to even save for a mortgage, right, for a deposit, right? So because you have this increase in demand for rented accommodation, the people who want to one day be housed, to buy these houses, right, they can never afford to save because the rent keeps increasing, going up, right? It is the housing situation in the UK is out of control. That is what we need to fix, right? Or okay, if you want to do like a special deal, right? Like what the UK government should do is any new built homes can only be purchased by first time buyers. Okay. And and have this, special scheme going. So at least these people, right, can get a fair shot at owning a property. Right. And then, what you could have, you could take like derelict, run down places in the UK, right? And it will encourage, young people to move there and create communities, which will be better for wider society, right? Obviously, like having a scheme like that has its own complications, and you would have to really sit through and look through to implement something like that. But that is one solution, right? Because the young people of this country are getting absolutely shafted. Nobody has asked for this war in Iran, okay? Yet the effects are felt by everybody across the world, right? This is why, we cannot trust the people that we have elected into, these positions of power, right? This is why we need to start afresh. This is why we need to start new communities. The game is over, right? If you think that you're going to be happy in the current state of society, if this is the way to live, you are absolutely wrong. This is why I am launching this channel. This is why I'm trying to find 100 like-minded people who want to work alongside me, who want to come up with new solutions to guide humanity to a new and better world. If you think that you're up for it, let me know. We can work together.
The cost for the UK government to borrow money for 10 years is just under 5%, and that's gone up from about 4.2% just a month ago. This means that because the UK government uses quite a complicated formula to decide how much it can spend, which factors into it the cost of borrowing, probably the UK government is going to struggle to respond to support consumers during this energy crisis.
So again, consumers get shafted. Who are the consumers, right? So the government cannot help the consumers. The consumers are the everyday people, right? So again, this is a war, supported around the globe, right, by the governments now, because we have to get the situation under control. Why start it? Okay, now obviously there are historic reasons for it. Israel was threatened. They are accusing Iran of supporting Hamas against Israel. So obviously that has its own little subplot going on there, and then America gets dragged in. Now the rest of the world is at a standstill because of this situation, and who gets fucked over? The consumers, right? This is why we need a new group of leaders. We need leaders who actually know what the fuck they're doing, who are able to negotiate these deals without resorting to war, without fucking killing innocent people and causing mass disruptions in everyday people.
And may even have to do further austerity.
There you go, further austerity, right? Like, I mean, ever since the financial crisis, this country's been on austerity anyway, right? And then any moment that austerity gets kind of lifted, right, then you have the next crisis and another reason to fucking cut back on spending, increase taxation. Everywhere you look, right, the normal people, the everyday people are just getting shafted. Okay, like it's like they get no breaks, right? Everything has become more expensive. Like it is so expensive that young people cannot afford to date. Young people cannot afford to start families, right? And then you look at wider society and think like people don't really everybody's isolated. Everybody, you have this loneliness epidemic going on. People don't really talk to each other anymore. People don't go out to pubs anymore. Okay, why? Because everything's too expensive. It's so much easier just to sit at home, right, and then just log onto the internet, watch shit on TikTok, watch shit on YouTube, play video games, right? Because at least it's cheap excitement, right? Because that is all that is left for people to do, right? That is left is for you to consume mindless dopamine filled content, right? Activities, cheap activities that have no actual benefit to your long-term health, to your long-term future. Okay, because every time you walk at the house, it costs you like 10-20 pounds, right? $10-20 is just spent walking at the house, for any given reason. It is absolutely out of control, the situation in the West.
That is not a UK specific issue. Borrowing costs have gone up for basically every country in the world, which increases this growing crisis of government indebtedness, high government interest payments, and will make it difficult for governments across the world basically to...
Yeah, and you have to remember, it's like, especially, a government like the UK, right, these aren't like, for example, like this country doesn't produce anything. It is a service-based economy, right? And a lot of it, the debt that is being collected, it's never going to be repaid back. It is, so therefore the citizens of this country are always going to be, indebted, right? And that is why taxes will keep increasing, right? Because, especially if, the interest rates go up on the debt that the government is servicing, right? Like who has to pay it off at the end of the day, right? The spending is controlled by governments, right? But the actually paying off the debt is done by its subjects, right? The people that live in that country. That is why you need to start your own country, right? You need to leave the system, start your own country, right? Become a king, build your kingdom so that you can live outside the system, so that you are not affected, that you don't have to play this fucking shit game anymore. Okay, be outside of zones of war. Okay, control your own kingdom, allow the people that you want to live with, the people that you want to associate with, to be within your kingdom. The world needs a better class of leaders. This is where you come in. This is what you do. It is your choice if you want to be a world leader.
To respond to support consumers, average people during the energy price crisis that is coming, that is already underway. Okay, so how is that going to affect you? It's going to affect you in pretty obvious ways. The prices which are likely to go up most are, number one, going to be energy, and number two, going to be food. That should be reminiscent of what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine. The big thing about price rises that are led by energy and food is energy and food are a much more significant percentage of spending for poorer people than for richer people.
Again, so the wealthy elites, the people at the top, the people who can, these people are designed to absorb these types of shocks. Okay, so they won't feel the squeeze, right? Obviously, they have to pay a little bit more money, but relative to the amount of wealth that they already have, it is quietly insignificant. Okay, so this is just another way for the small person to get shafted, and this is what they want. They want you in a state of anxiety and fear, right? So you watch the news, you see what's going on in Iran. Okay, you hear about the rising costs that are coming, and you already become very fearful. Okay, and then energy prices go up. Okay, cost of food goes up, right? So now you're spending more and more money on these things. Your cortisol and stress levels are going to be through the fucking roof. No wonder people have anxiety. No wonder people have we live in the literally the most depressed time that we've ever lived, right? More and more people are coming out saying that they are that they're burnt out, that they're feeling fatigue, that they're overworked, overstressed, underpaid, right? It is the situation that these world elites are creating. Okay, like with the COVID pandemic, for example, right? You can give it a pass, right? Because if you're a conspiracy theorist, you're gonna think it was man-made anyway. But let's say it wasn't man-made. Let's say it was a natural occurring, virus that went around the world, and it was a health pandemic. Okay, right? Okay, great, that happens. Okay, so we can observe the shock. Okay, so as a person, as a country, as a human being, as a member of the global population, the global population absorbed that shock because it was a time of crisis. Okay, great. This situation isn't man-made, right? This is a situation instigated by Israel and America. Okay, what about the financial crisis in 08? Right, that again, that was a man-made situation done by greedy bankers, okay, who overextended themselves, and who ended up paying, right? It was a normal person, the everyday person absorbing that shock. They're the ones who felt this fucking you know uh it hit their bottom line. Okay, it hit their wallet, and it is always the person at the bottom who is getting shafted. The situation's out of control. It is absolutely disgusting, and this is going to get worse and worse and worse, right? At least have a boom and bust cycle. Okay, but we live in a country where it is forever bust, right? And the only boom that is left is within asset prices, within property prices, property, real estate, stocks and shares, right? Crypto, right? Like that is where you can make some money. That is where the economy is disconnected from reality. you know, and who owns those assets? It's wealthy people again, right? So the boom and bust cycles of previous economies, economic cycles, exist for wealthy people, but for the everyday man, poorer people, you know, who don't own any assets, they don't get the benefits of any fucking boom, right? Because, you know, during the bust cycle, right, everything's expensive, right? So they have to spend more money to, you know, for sustenance and, you know, just for living, surviving, right? And then because they don't save any money, then when there is a boom cycle, that they can't invest in the fucking assets to reap the benefits. It is a rigged game. It is a rigged situation for the people, the everyday people of the world.
It is a big chunk of the spending of an ordinary family, but for very wealthy people, it's a very small percentage of their overall expenditure. So basically, this crisis is going to hit the poorest the hardest, and it's going to have the most obvious impacts. It's going to be more expensive for you to heat your home, to turn your air conditioning on, to drive your car, to probably take any flights if you want to take flights, and also to feed your family. So the next question is, how do you protect yourself? The obvious thing,
I mean, just going back to what he said, is like, yeah, it's going to get harder to feed your families, right? Like, so what happens, right? Like in a situation where, you know, this is obviously, I don't think it's going to be a very prolonged situation. I do think it should be wrapped up, hopefully, you know, by I would imagine in the next 2 months. I think it will take 2-3 months to resolve it, but at least it will get resolved this year, right? It cannot be dragged out like the situation in the Ukraine. Like it just cannot. Like if the fucking world governments, if America, if Trump, you know, Israel, if these countries are so incompetent that they fucking drag this war out, it is going to be, you know, out of control. And like that, because they killed, you know, the Ayatollah there, the leader, right? Like they are less likely to negotiate for peace. Because you get what I mean? Because you cut off its head, right? And you know, normally when that phrase you say, "Oh, you cut off its head," right? The threat will die. In this essence, it grew a new head, okay, because a new Ayatollah got elected, and they want revenge, right? So you know, it's going to be hard to come to terms with peace. However, you know, um, if this government, if these people who are in charge are so incompetent that they cannot resolve this issue, you know, like there is no hope for the future. I'm telling you now, there is no fucking hope for the future.
that is going to happen here, which also happened when Russia invaded Ukraine, is there is going to be a lot of pressure on governments to react to protect their citizens, which is you.
They're not going to protect the citizens, okay? They are going to squeeze the citizens, because these governments, they want you in a state of you know, fear, anxiety, where, you know, they can manipulate you, where they can coerce you into pushing a certain narrative. You know, they want you isolated, they want you feeling depressed, they want you poor. So you know that, you know, as the years go by, you become more and more reliant on the government, to the point of, you know, where you are so weak, you are, you know, they want you within a 50-minute city, they want you plugged in to the metaverse, they want you online, you know, consuming brain rot content. They want you in a weak state because they want to manipulate you. They want to, you know, usher in this new agenda 2030, where, you know, the elites will, in essence, usher in a surveillance state, and they want to make you more reliant on the government.
Now, the obvious thing that is going to happen, which happens automatically to a degree in this country and will happen across the world, is governments will be pressured to basically respond directly to the most obvious and visible consequence of what has happened, which is rising energy prices. And governments will be pressured to cap energy prices, to subsidize energy, to reduce taxation of energy.
Again, if energy is subsidized, right? Like, how do they subsidize it? Through taxation, right? So, you know, the obviously, like, the poorest within the community, you know, they'll get this subsidization, you know, but the everyday working people who, you know, kind of don't fall into that bracket of absolute poverty, right? Where, you know, they are just about, you know, literally breaking even, that where they don't have to rely on the government, but they, you know, they also aren't living a life of fucking luxury. Like these people will get shafted because they would have to contribute more in higher taxes to normal people. And the other thing is, they collect taxes through you know, VATs, you know, and when prices of the actual good is going up anyway, and because VAT is you know, calculated by a percentage of the cost of the good, right? So the cost will go up automatically, as he said, because it is baked into the system.
Basically, governments will be incentivized to keep the price of energy down. And this is a really bad policy. I'm going to explain why. So I think if we get this, and we will get this to some degree in basically every country in the world, this policy of governments subsidizing.
And the other thing is, like, even if the government was to subsidize this, oh my god, from by borrowing, okay. So in essence, is taking on more debt, right? The country is already over leveraged, right? The country is already has too much fucking debt, right? Little economic growth, right? High debt, right? The country's over leveraged. It takes on, it borrows more loans, right? It takes on more debt to subsidize energy. Okay, who 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 pays for it, right? Oh, it's future taxation, right? The future, the future you, right? Because governments kind of hope like, oh yeah, in 2 3 years time, you know, the economic situation will be better. You know, things, you know, economic growth will increase again, and then, you know, we can balance the books, right? Like we're in a situation where there is, you know, very little economic growth. Okay, this country is not producing anything. The UK is not manufacturing anything, right? It is reliant on global trade. It is a service-based economy. You know, it's always right. This economic growth is going to become stagnant, right? And especially with a aging population, and a population of young people who, you know, are getting less. They're not incentivized to be a productive member of society, right? Because they cannot afford to get on the property ladder, they cannot afford to buy houses, they cannot afford to live, right? So literally, if you speak to fucking young people today, right, you know, many of them are just so, you know, isolated. Many of them literally have just one friend if they're lucky. Okay, many of them people are spending more and more time online. They're not dating, they're not making real life connections. You know, they're not working, right? Because you know, what's the incentive for them, right? Because they, you know, house prices are out of control. Okay, they cannot afford to buy a house. That, you know, most people now in the UK, you know, they buy the first house. You know, they put the first deposit down when they get to the age of 30 plus, right? So you tell like a 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, okay, you know, like, you know, um, man up, right? Like, become an adult, right? What are they doing towards that, right? Um, they literally have to, when they're 30, then they'll feel like an adult, because that's when they can fucking finally afford to partake in adult activities such as, you know, settling down, raising a family, okay, being a active member of the community, right? But the incentives aren't just they're just not there anymore for these people. So you're also, you know, thinking, you know, in 5 years time, you know, where's the economic growth going to come when you have a whole generation of workers who are depressed? It's just not going to happen. Okay,
Governments directly coming in to keep the price of energy down, we will basically be repeating the economic mistakes which we made in COVID. So those of you who have watched this channel,
exactly. So, you know, like this is like in, I mean, if you think about it, since '08, right? The '08 financial crisis, okay? Because, you know, there was the previous period, you know, obviously you had the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s, then you had a period of recovery. I know 9/11, again, you know, there was uncertainty in the markets, but the period in the mid 2000s, right, up until '07, you know, was a really prosperous time, okay? House prices were going up, you know, asset prices were going up. Okay, so it was like the last time when you could really point to an actual boom, right, in where in terms of assets were going up and also like economic growth. Okay, but then ever since '08, the financial crisis, the credit crunch that happened in all across the globe, right? In financial markets, like ever since then, like that was the first man-made crisis that we lived through, right? Then if you like, I mean, you also have these little mini ones, but especially Brexit here in the UK. Okay, that was a time again of uncertainty. Many problems within the market. But again, you can consider it quite a small one, right? But COVID was a massive one, and now this Iran war. Okay, so again, these crises keep coming. These governments' response is, they never learn from their mistakes. They always respond too late in the wrong way, and the people at the bottom are the ones who are paying the fucking price for it, right? This is leading to a world. This is leading to a situation in the future where it is just going to get more worse and worse and worse, right? Because you have to think about it, right? Like even people who like now are in their 40s and 50s and 60s, for example, right? At least they experienced that prosperity phase, in the early 2000s or the 90s, right? If you're like, what do you call it, Gen Z now, right, like a 20-year-old, like all you've seen is just, like living through, obviously the stock market and, the real economy, they are separated now, okay? This is what you call a K-shaped economy, where asset prices keep going up because of inflation. But the actual everyday economy, like prices, is the effects of it is felt all across the normal working class people, right? So you have this whole generation who've never experienced like a prosperous economy. Okay, and then you have COVID comes again, more problems. Now you have this situation, and these situations are going to, they're going to keep happening more and more and more often. Okay, to the point of where you're so used to it becomes a new fucking normal, right? That the new normal is, for there to be some situation in the world where costs go up and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, life shit, yeah, okay. Oh, okay, we gotta spend more, right? Okay, yeah. So where is the motivation to be prosperous? Where is the motivation to, be, to contribute towards economic growth, right? The government does not help itself help its people.
From the beginning will know that I started this channel in June 2020 because we were in the early stages of the COVID crisis, and it was relatively clear to me that governments here in the UK, also around the world, were going to respond to the economic crisis in such a way that they eliminated the most obvious, visible, negative consequences of the economic crisis, which at the time was primarily lockdown, but in a way that caused enormous negative side effects, namely a massive decrease in government wealth, a massive increase in the wealth of the richest, and obviously as a consequence of those two things, an enormous increase in inequality. And I think the way that...
Yeah, so again, it's very short-sighted, the actions that the governments take, right? They are just literally, okay, like the fire's here, right? Let's concentrate over here, okay? When there's literally other fucking fires being started in multiple places, right? The effects of, shutting down this fire has, causes the next fucking fire. And these people are just short-term, the short-term thinking that these people have is leading to, a situation where we are just in never-ending cycles of crises, okay? And a lot of the time, what the people in charge in government will say is like, well, okay, this is not my problem. Whoever gets elected next, they can fucking deal with that issue down the line. Right? So they're just kind of passing the buck as long as their, their perception in the media, is that they are a good person, that they are trying the fucking hardest to, solve the situation. That is all that these people care for. Right? The people in charge, people in governments, these politicians, they're just narcissists. Okay, they're psychopaths. They're narcissists. They want to be perceived as a good person and trying to do their fucking best, when in reality all they're doing is making situations worse. They are ruining people's lives.
We reacted to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the way that governments are likely to react to this crisis now, trying to directly subsidize energy prices, basically is making the exact same mistake again, which is, okay, what do we want to do? We want to get rid of the most terrible, most visible economic impact of what is happening. So in the case of this energy price crisis, that is expensive energy, and in the case of COVID and lockdown, that was people can't work, people can't pay their wages. So the sort of most basic sort of idiot level economic response is, okay, what we want to do now is keep energy prices low, and what we wanted to do in COVID was keep paying people's wages. So what we simply do is the government goes and either borrows a ton of money or prints a ton of money and pays to keep energy prices down and pays people to work. And when that happens, what you see is the government
pay to keep energy prices down and pay to keep people in jobs. Okay, well, why don't you make a situation where the fucking wages that are being paid to employees, right, are naturally going up with inflation? Okay, and I'm not talking about actual interventions such as minimum wage or shit like that. I'm talking about actually um not allowing for the demand of the for jobs to go down. Okay, because the demand for jobs is so high, right, that many people cannot afford um you know to work on the wage that's been given, but they have no fucking choice, right? It is an artificial situation. That is why even with immigration, more and more people coming in, right? Because if you think about it, with immigration, a lot of these, like you've seen it in your everyday life anywhere, right? Like people who are delivery drivers, people who are working in fast food, people who are for example working in um what was it, Uber Eats, and Deliveroo and all these things, right? They tend to be of foreign descent. They tend to be immigrants, who just come to the country, and that is like the first job they get, and that is where they work, right? That used to be jobs, right, for like 80, like literally college students. Okay, people like like once you do your GCSEs and you go into college, doing your A levels, right? Like you get a part-time job. Like I remember I used to work in places like I worked at IKEA, I worked at TK Maxx for a while, and that was like a part-time job I had, right? um you get paid minimum wage, maybe just a little bit more than minimum wage, and it pays for your fuel, it pays for your drinks at the weekend, you save a little bit of money for your clothes, right? And you start participating in adult life in one way. Okay, like paying your way around the world, right? But those jobs don't exist for young people anymore, right? Like they don't exist anymore. And you have this higher demand for these jobs, and that is why, because so many people want these fucking jobs, they aren't able to pay a good wage, a living wage for it, especially with energy, with inflation, prices of goods going up, is going to get worse and worse. This is why we are in this situation.
Government prints a ton of money or borrows money from the rich, and in the case of COVID, gave money to poorer people who immediately used it to pay their rent and their bills, and it went to richer people. Or in the case of energy price crisis, they give it directly to the owners of the energy, which means a massive decrease in government wealth and a massive increase in wealth of the richest. And I think what you're seeing here is a repeat of basically the same two mistakes, which are being basically consistently made every time we have an economic crisis here in the UK, in the US, in any Western country, which is naivety about wealth and naivety about distribution. So when COVID happened and the government gave an enormous amount of money out, I was screaming about what the long-term implications of that would be. I was saying that it would lead to collapsing government wealth, which would lead eventually to austerity. I was saying that it would lead to enormous accumulation of cash by the rich, which would lead to increased asset prices, more unaffordable housing, falling living standards and inflation crisis. But at the time, there wasn't really much appetite for this kind of discussion because people were very focused on the immediate short-term economic problem, which at the time of COVID was, we need to do a lockdown, people need to be paid if they can't work. And in the energy crisis, which is starting now, it was people need to buy energy prices going up, government needs to subsidize that energy.
I mean, are they going to subsidize fucking petrol? Are they going to subsidize your fuel costs, right? Because that's energy as well, right? It's not just fucking your house energy. It's also like how are people going to afford to go to the jobs, right? Like many people, use their vehicle, right? I think about all delivery drivers, right? So everything's going to become more expensive, right? Like even your Uber Eats, even your fucking Ubers, the price of that's going to go up because the fuel cost goes up, right? Like are the government going to subsidize that? I doubt it. I doubt it very much. They are not going to help you in every way possible. They are only going to help and look like that they are fucking doing something. It is more of a performative situation. Instead, don't allow yourself to be in a situation like this. Okay. I mean, is nuclear an option, right? Should we go nuclear? Should we, have nuclear power plants so that we can produce our own fucking energy, right? That is one way to keep energy down. Okay, that is one way to actually help, right? Or imagine this, right? You have a nuclear power plant, okay, and then literally free energy for the whole fucking country. Okay, like if you earn this much amount of money, right, under 30,000, 40,000 pounds a year, dollars a year or whatever, right? Like you get free energy, okay, and that's saving, people will then be able to use that system, that amount of money that they save to pump back into the economy, okay, and that will help towards economic growth, right? That is one way to do it, but the UK government needs to produce something, right? It needs to fucking come up with a solution for its people.
It's very important to recognise that these government measures, the paying of people's wages during COVID, and the subsidising of energy prices or the reduction of energy taxes now, do not come for free. They cost the government money. So what you are getting is protection from the immediate impact of this crisis at the cost of loss of government wealth and also at the cost of increased wealth of the richest. So basically, I think we've fallen into a basic systemic playbook in the UK, in Western countries, of the way that we deal with crises is we massively increase inequality and we give away government wealth to deal with the symptom of the problem, and we just don't worry about the increased inequality.
So again, so what he's just explained there is a mismanagement by the government, right? So these people who you've elected, right, the people who who get put in these positions of power, to help the nation, guide the nation through crises, towards prosperity, right, to a better country, to a better world, right, to have a better life, right? They totally mismanage the situation, right? They don't have a fucking clue what's going on, right? Like, what are you supposed to do, right? If you like, what are you supposed to do? Move away somewhere else, okay, to an equally incompetent government in this country. This is why I'm telling you, man, like you have to leave the system. I'm leaving the system, right? This is why I've started this channel, right? I want to find like-minded people who are pissed off, who are fed up with the current way that the world is structured. Okay, the people in power only have power because the everyday people give them that power, okay, and it is time that we take that power back, that we start looking out for one another, that we start doing something to give an alternative for the people. Okay, this is why I'm telling you to become a king, to be seen as a king, to become a point of authority, start your new nation, start your new country. Okay, rise through the ranks, right? This is a long journey that we are ahead going for, right? We are going to overthrow the world governments and become the new ruling class around the globe. But it's it's not going to happen overnight. Okay, we're going to buy private islands. We are going to establish new nations on our own terms, where we value freedom, we value autonomy. We do not want to be in a surveillance state. We do not want to bow down to these evil elites, these incompetent elites, these people in charge who have no clue what the fuck they are doing.
That leads on from that. Okay, so we should explain briefly how a price cap in general would work. When prices are capped in such,
and just quickly, I remembered like how do you go about it? How do you go about becoming a king and be seen as a king, right? The way to do it is to become a subject matter expert, right? And Gary's Economics is a guy. He is a subject matter expert in the field of economics, right? He is a former banker himself. He's worked in financial institutions, and his expertise lies in his understanding of the economics, in particular interest rates and inflation, and how it affects government policy and the allocation of resources within a country around the world, right? And then he uses that information to make money via trading. But in essence, overall, he is a subject matter expert, okay, in economics, hence the name Gary's Economics. And there is something that you are good at, okay? There is something in the world that you are meant to do. There is something that you're very naturally good at. There is a calling that you have, okay, in a field of interest, something that you're interested in. you know in essence, that is your life purpose, okay? That is your zone of genius. That is what you are meant to do on this earth, right? And I want you to become a subject matter expert in that field, okay? And why a subject matter expert? Because once you are seen as a subject matter expert, and once you broadcast your expertise onto the world, you will gain a following. You will gain, people will follow you. People will want to know more and more about what you have to say about certain topics. And when you have, that, a following like that, you have in essence authority, right? You are seen as a point of authority. People want to talk to you. People want to ask you questions about what is going on. I mean, like Gary's Economics, for example, people want to know, look, man, the war has just started in Iran, all right? Tell me what's going to happen. Okay, how do I protect my wealth, right? And that is why he is a point of authority for many people, for economics, within economics, okay, global political affairs. Right. But we go one step beyond, right? Because not only are we seen as subject matter experts, living in a zone of genius, not only are we points of authority, we go one step further. Okay. We plan, and alongside the other 100 kings here at Royal Instinct, we are forming the Amicis, the Royal Alliance of Kings, who will, come and offer humanity an alternative, right? We are going to be the ones who, give freedom to the world, a choice where they can remain in the old system, the current system, or they can come join our new system that we will implement. We are bringing together 100 geniuses, 100 people who are living their life purpose to come up with new solutions, creative solutions, a new world that we are trying to build to guide humanity to the next phase of human evolution. That is what our plan is. That is what we are doing. We are building side by side, shoulder to shoulder. We are ready to take on and overthrow the evil elites.
Situations like this, the way that works is you pay a lower cost, and the extra price, the price that has gone up, is basically paid by the government. So even though you do not see the price going up, you are effectively, via your government, via your taxation, or via loss in your government's wealth, you are still paying the higher price. You don't pay it, the government pays the extra, and that extra amount goes to basically the owners of the energy, the owners of the oil. But this approach of let's just stop the price going up by allowing the government to take the loss, I think also has the weakness of making the mistake of being excessively focused on money and not really recognizing the importance of real resources. I did a video last year saying, like, forget about money. Money is not the only thing that matters. What actually matters is real resources. The fact of the matter is, there is less oil and gas now, and somebody has to use less oil and gas. A sensible government would be thinking about how can we reduce.
The thing is, the governments are not sensible, right? So you always have to remember that. The example he's about to give is what a sensible government will do. There are no sensible fucking governments around.
Reduce our usage in a way that is basically best for our country, and would be trying to do things like, let's try and reduce very wasteful usage, like private jets, these kinds of things. Let's reduce the most wasteful usage where we can. If you simply try to keep the price down when there is less oil going around, it is going to cost you an enormous amount, because nobody is going to reduce their usage. So what you'll probably have in the end is price goes up a little bit, government takes a massive loss, and at the end of the day, the people who reduce their usage are going to be the poor, because poor people are much more responsive to changes in price than the rich. I think it's important to recognise rich people, they don't really care how much their energy costs. They don't check the price of their energy before they decide how much heating to use. They don't really care the cost of their flights are.
Yeah, because very wealthy people, like energy costs, that the type of cost that he's talking about, it makes such a small fraction amount relative to the amount of money that they have that it doesn't fucking matter, right? For example, if you was to buy, like, I don't know, milk, for example, and your milk goes up by 2 cents, okay, like, you don't really care. Like, it used to be, $1.10, and now it's $1.12, right? Like, okay, it's gone up, right? 2 cents, whatever, right? 2 cents, you don't have to think, oh my god, no, I'm gonna about to break the bank, right? Whereas if it went up by, $3, $4, you'd be like, oh, like, what the fuck's going on? um you know it's the same way how the wealthy, rich people, talk about, buying a flight, right? The cost of a flight might go up by $100, but to a wealthy person, a rich person, it doesn't, doesn't make no difference, right? In that same way, um, but an average person, a normal person, who has to fucking, making, about $30,000 a year, £30,000 a year, they're going to think twice about going somewhere, if the cost of it increases by a couple $100, right? This is the difference in mentality, how people perceive wealth.
They are going to consume as much as they're going to consume, regardless of price. If you allow price to rise a little bit and the government takes a massive loss, the people who end up reducing their consumption will be the poor anyway. And I think in a sensible country, we would be looking at how can we reduce the most wasteful usage, rather than forcing poor people to consume less. The third thing is that this policy in the UK of basically taking the whole loss on the government is increasingly going to be arguably impossible because of this other thing we have seen, which is big increase in government borrowing rates. I've been speaking about this for a long time now, but the financial markets have been watching the UK very closely. And whenever the UK government tries to spend more money, they basically shut it down, which means that we're in a situation now where it's quite possible the UK government will not be able to significantly subsidise your energy bills.
Yeah, so the UK government cannot afford to subsidize it anymore, right? To help out normal average people who, right? So even if they want you dependent on it, they can't even fucking give you anything because it spent all its money, right? It has no more credit left, right? I mean, think about it. Like, if you earn a salary and you just got a mortgage and you take out, you've got credit card debt, and then you want to take out a car, loan to buy a new car with, right? And then they do a credit check on you. They're like, okay, is this person, with the amount of money that they got coming in, are they going to be able to fucking pay back, the amount of money that is owed plus the, interest, right? They look at the UK government and the way that it's run, but and especially by the incompetent people that are running it, right? And they're like, okay, nah, this is fucked. You guys are not going to be able to borrow any more money because you need to pay back some of the debt that you have accumulated. Okay, you need to start reducing your debt. This country needs to produce something. This country needs to increase its GDP by producing.
Which basically means if you're hoping your government will do something, they probably won't, they probably can't, because they spent all of their money and all of their wealth on the last two crises where they should have been taxing the rich, but instead they funded by borrowing from the rich. Yeah, this is what happens when you have governments which are incredibly naive to wealth and incredibly naive to distribution.
Is it just naivety, or do they just don't care, right? Like, is it naivety, or they're just literally incompetent who don't give a shit, right? Or are they trying to solve this, create the situation, right? Are they trying to create more and more pressure on the everyday person, until something breaks in them? Like, are they actively trying to create a situation, right, where its people are more depressed, more stressed out, more anxious, okay, where they're being pushed more and more and more, by higher, living costs, where they cannot afford to live, right? Like, what's the end goal here? What are they trying to create? When you start talking like this, okay, and it's a valid question to ask, right? Like, why, do they allow this to happen? Okay. You start venturing down conspiracy holes, right? You start thinking, like, and with like, something that reference to is Agenda 2030, the World Economic Forum, and this is, something that they're actively trying to push, right? Many government leaders, many companies around the globe, all countries around the globe are pretty much, signed on to, deliver this Agenda 2030. and in essence, what they're trying to do is create a massively planned surveillance state where movement, transportation, spending within an economy is massively surveilled, literally observed by the government, right? And in essence, your freedom and liberties are being taken away. Okay, they are being reduced. They want to reduce your freedom, right? They want you more dependent, and the best way to do it is to have you so depressed, so stressed out, so weak, because you can't afford to live, right? Because everything's so expensive. You're not part of the asset investor group, right? You can't invest in assets because you just don't have the money, right? Only the rich, wealthy elites are able to take advantage of increased asset prices, and you're just left kind of living life, barely surviving. And what happens then? You're not strong enough to fight back. You barely are able to you know push back against that type of regime, because where else would you turn to? That is when you are easily manipulated. That is what these governments want from you. They want to keep you weak. They want to manipulate you. They want to push their own agenda for their own evil plan that they are trying to hatch. And this is why I keep saying that we need to come together. I'm looking for 100 people, 100 leaders to bring about a new phase of human evolution, to bring about an alternative for the everyday people. Because if good people such as myself and you, the 100 kings that I'm trying to connect and build with, if we don't do it, if you don't do it, who the fuck will? Right? Because normally good people have anxiety and fears which are holding them back from taking action. Right? This is what once you remove that self-doubt, once you remove that fear that is holding you back, you are free to go forth and fully release your personality, charisma, your philosophies onto the world, to try and help people. Right? That is what we need to do. That is how we need to usher in a new hope for the people, for the future. But that is it for today. That was an interesting episode, I think. But yeah, I think that's it for today. Thank you very much, and I will see you tomorrow.